Hello everyone and welcome back to another high-level match of StarCraft 2. Now, I specifically selected this particular replay just now because it's been a while since we've had a look at a long game of Zerg versus Zerg. Generally speaking, this is by far the most explosive matchup in all of StarCraft 2. Okay, these games, they tend to end at the 5-minute mark. Now, I know that this game goes the distance because I looked at the replay timer. Maybe I shouldn't have told you that, but there's no denying that our Zerg player here in red has decided to start off the game with a spawning pool at 12 supply. You can literally not get a spawning pool any earlier than this. No. Okay, I was gonna say, that could be a... I think it's gonna go across the map. Okay, spotting right here the red Zerg drones. We're looking, well, of course, at none other than Dark's main hatchery. I'm gonna follow this drone around for a little bit before I introduce the opponent, because I've casted a lot of Dark games where he is going for a proxy hatch against Protoss players, right? That seems to be one of his go-to strategies right now. He's even been executing proxy hatcheries against Terran. The only reason to send out a drone at this point that I can imagine is to go for a proxy hatchery against Zerg as well. I think that's what we're doing, right? Yeah, it is. Alright, well, he's going up against the Zerg player here in blue. Ah, okay, we're canceling it in favor of a spine crawler. That makes a little bit more sense. I was gonna say, what are we gonna do with that? Anyways, this is a hatchery first right here from his opponent, playing with the blue Zerg drones. We have a man who's currently unaware of the fact that he's being cheesed, and he goes by the name of soO. Alright, so, Zerglings are running across. This is something that soO has just picked up on. The thing is, if you look at the vision radius right here of this very first hatchery that he's built, yeah, he doesn't know. Remember I casted a viewer-submitted game about a month or so ago, where the player that this was executed against accused the opponent of cheating because suddenly a spine crawler appeared? Yeah, this is a build order that I didn't think was viable at this level of play. I mean, basically what it comes down to is that this is an exceptionally expensive spine, right? This spine crawler is basically like 400 minerals. It's made out of gold. So he's not actually microing the links right here. Don't know if that was entirely intentional. He's gonna be able to finish that hatchery regardless, right? Yeah. So he just wants to maximize the amount of damage that he's done. Honestly though, 2 workers here. Yeah, 2 workers and a hatchery, of course. It's really not even that great. It looks pretty dang good right here for Dark, because he killed his opponent natural and the drones were not mining there for a while. It's very expensive to go for a build order like this, right? So if you look at the worker count right now, it's 16 drones in favor of soO, versus only 12 for Dark, who just finished up his own natural, so that is something that Dark has got going for himself. He's now actually ahead in bases, despite the fact that he went for a proxy hatchery first. Brenda the Queen helping out quite a bit. If she falls though, this actually becomes a lot shakier. And I think she will go down, yeah. Okay, so yeah, the problem with an opener like this, right? Because everything is actually relatively stable at this point. The problem is that all of the timings that you've been practicing in a game like StarCraft 2, they're all of a sudden thrown out of the window. You may be familiar with a standard timing for Zergling speed to get started with, right? And then when you should be putting down your Baneling nest, and when you probably want to transition to a lair and maybe an Evo chamber, when you should be putting down your Roach Warren or maybe go for a Spire. All of those timings are now entirely thrown out of the window, and both players are gonna have to play, yeah, mostly feeling based, I suppose. Now, I've cast a lot of Dark games, and Dark is definitely someone who likes to play that sort of way, right? He never really plays very rigidly. He's always pretty free-flowing. So gas timings are another question here. Like, how exactly do you decide when to put the drones back in gas? When do you even go for your very first extractor? So soO has mined 100 gas here, and he decided to go for the metabolic boost upgrade. So that means that these Zerglings are gonna grow little wings here in just a moment. For Dark, since he's going double gas, I don't think he wants to go link speed. If I were to make a guess, I think he's gonna go straight into a lair and stick on 2 bases for now. The problem is though, without Zergling speed, you can't really secure a 3rd hatchery very easily. Okay, thought for a second that this bad boy was gonna head on over here. There's no way you can really fight speedlings with slow Zerglings. It just doesn't really happen. So now the little wings are available here for soO. He's gonna be able to go immediately on the counterattack. He doesn't know about the base here on the left, so he's got no vision of it, but he should be able to find out very quickly what he's playing against anyways. Royal Blood does feature a relatively tight choke. So now the question is, nah, there's no way. Really, soO? He's droning behind this, so I'm not entirely sure if I agree. I think what he's trying to do is scare Dark into making a lot of links. But if you look at Dark's production tab here, he's been making non-stop drones. I think this would have been worthwhile, because that was a lot of Zerglings right there for one queen. I think this would have been worthwhile if Dark panicked and then made a whole bunch of slow Zerglings or something, but yeah, he didn't care. He does decide to go straight into a lair. And relatively speaking, this is quite quick, but we're still 5.5 minutes into this match. Third base just finished up right here for soO. He now is going for his missile upgrade, and now also a Roach Warren. So currently only the queens benefit from that upgrade, but very soon we'll see a couple roaches coming out as well that will benefit from that upgrade too. If I were to make a guess, I think that Dark will probably go... He can really only go into a Spire or a Nidus Worm. I think those are the most likely option. I guess he could also just go into Roach Speed and then try to, yeah, leverage himself into a third hatchery and just drone up. But honestly, that doesn't really feel like Dark's way. I really feel like this is probably going to be a Spire, but it's a little hard to say. Lara finished up just now. What are we going to do? Well, he's got a bunch of gas in the bank. He's mining all 4 gases here too. No, he's just going for an Overseer Scout. Okay. Overseer Scout into Roaches and then also Glio Reconstitution, which is Roach Speed. In the meantime, on the other side of the map, soO is a little bit concerned about this 2-base situation. So he knows that he's been out mining his opponent here for a little while already, so he decides to go for a Spine Crawler. With the Creep Tumor over here, the Spine Crawler would have vision on the high ground anyways. So not the end of the world. soO right now has got himself the Lair 2. Is he maybe gonna go for a Spire? Honestly, I don't think so. Because now, like, you either, like, rush out the Spire or you get one when you're already significantly ahead. If you're gonna go for a Spire in the mid-game, you really can't do it properly until you've already had a good Roach engagement. Because the Spire is 200 minerals, 200 gas, it takes forever. And obviously, like, it takes forever to build, that is. And obviously, while you're building it, you've just spent all of that money into things that aren't out yet, so... Usually you'll just end up with far less roaches. So this is just a good old Roach Speed +1 timing attack here for Dark, who's now sending his roaches across the map. Army value-wise, you can see that both players have been growing quite nicely in that department. I think that Dark just looked at this, he sees the Spine Crawler, he sees the Roach count, he realizes it's not going to happen. So now he's forced to march back home. Wouldn't be surprised if he's going to maybe go for another round of drones and maybe even consider making a 4th. But everything is going quite well here for soO. So if you look at the army size over here, preferably you build army later in a game of StarCraft 2, so you actually can use that economy for longer. So you can see right here that soO is building his army a little bit later, and he ends up with more stuff. That's because he's been ahead economically here for a little while already. Okay. So where are we gonna go from here? Because this game has been very awkward. Now both players have been making a large army for a while, but neither really wanted to commit to a fight. It becomes quite tricky to know when you can go back to droning and when it's safe to do so. Instead, we're going to use a couple of Ravagers here. 4 Ravagers to start biling down as many of those Overlords as possible. 4 Ravagers, I guess, just to put the nail in the coffin. You don't technically need 4, but... may as well. Okay. Yeah, so now we're playing, Roach Chicken, right? Who wants to attack first? The problem is... Contamination, by the way, on the Evo chamber. That's quite nice. The problem is that the defender's advantage is very significant, right? So the defender's advantage in Zerg versus Zerg specifically is usually in the advantage of the defensive player, because the units that they're making while the fight is going on, they will spawn closer to the battle. So say, for example, Dark decides to attack right now. soO's reinforcements are going to spawn right from these, well, these cocoons, these eggs right over here, and they'll be joining the main battle very quickly. In the other matchups, in like the Terran matchups and the Protoss matchups, that is not as extremely obvious because of the fact that, well, their units just take a lot longer to produce. So for Zerg, since their army comes out in such big numbers so quickly, the defender's advantage is not to be underestimated. And that's what both players are a little bit scared of right now. They're mostly just sitting on their own creep, waiting for the opponent to attack, because they know that the first guy to attack will probably fall behind. Dark is making one little deviation with the Tunneling Claws upgrade and the Burrow research. So this is going to allow him to tunnel those roaches on the ground and Maybe start hitting the opponent in a couple different angles at once. Okay, the favor is returned, but Dark wasn't even really researching in that Evo chamber at the moment anyways. Okay, so. A round of roaches here, split off from the pack. Yep, they're gonna be tunneling across the map and they're gonna try and deal damage. The same is happening right over here on the left. So Dark basically taking like 15 or so roaches out of his main army to try and see if he can deal some damage all over. It's a great idea, but obviously that now means that the main bulk of Dark's army is a little bit weaker. soO's been playing this a little too passively for my liking. He does have Overseers up in the air, so he sees a couple of those units. At the same time, there was an engagement over here on the right side too, but yeah, against good players, Tunneling Claws usually doesn't work out as well. You're trying to create chaos, you're trying to make it difficult for them to handle everything at once, but when you're dealing with players that have a lot of disposable actions per minute, I mean, soO at a flat 400 here, on average so far, he is more than fast enough to defend 3 different areas of the map at once. Okay, good engagement over here as well. That concave happily in favor, or happily in favor too, but I was gonna say heavily in favor of soO. Lurker Den coming up right now for Dark. Lurkers are amazing, but again, it's expensive to transition into. You can see this reflected right now in the bank. I am a little bit concerned though with how passive soO is playing this. So there was actually talks going on at IEM Katowice specifically. And I don't really know exactly how true this is, because you always have to take the pro gamer's word with a grain of salt. But basically all of the Zerg players were saying that nobody right now wants to play Zerg versus Zerg. Nobody wants to practice Zerg versus Zerg. Now, I'm not exactly sure how, like basically, especially the European Zergs, they were saying, well, Zerg versus Zerg is a figured out matchup. We know how to play it, so we don't need to practice it. I'm not entirely sure if I agree. But it seemed like a similar sentiment was also, yeah, mentioned by the Korean Zergs. So maybe soO right here, just a little uncertain. Or maybe he knows exactly what he's doing, actually. He's going into his own Lurker Den right now, too. He's got a nice bank, but he's playing this so passively right now that he's been sitting on a maxed out army here for quite a while. Army supply-wise, actually, identical game here, but they're mostly just tiptoeing around each other. When that was said, though, I actually felt kind of bad for Serral specifically, because Serral has been historically quite bad at the Zerg versus Zerg matchup. And Serral basically said, okay, Raynor doesn't want to practice with me. Lambo doesn't want to practice with me. Elaser doesn't want to practice with me. So how do I learn to play Zerg versus Zerg? Like if you're a top-level player, you need other top-level players to practice against. And if these other guys don't want to practice with you, what do? Now, if Serral wants to practice Zerg versus Zerg with me, hit me up, buddy. I'll jump right into a custom game. The problem is, you can destroy me with just a couple of Zerglings. So, it actually is it's a bit of a dilemma, right? So, guys like, for example, Raynor, they face off against Serral regularly in tournaments. Raynor has been winning against Serral over the last couple of years, more often than not, in the Zerg versus Zerg matchup. So, why in the world would Raynor help out Serral get better at that matchup? I guess that's a problem with being a top-level player, right? It's a first world or first, world gamer problem, I suppose. But if you're too good at the game, sometimes players don't want to necessarily help you out either. Anyways, now we finally have an engagement. soO, I don't like this fight over here at all. I don't really like the fight over there very much either, because now the Lurkers are out and they deal a lot of damage. Dark has also got a little hit squad of roaches here on the other side of the map. Both players at this point, honestly, are mostly fighting just because they want to get rid of their roaches. The era of the roach is out, okay? We've researched how to do iron. Bronze tools are no longer cool. So Hydra Lurker is likely going to be the next option here for both players. Usually in Zerg versus Zerg, at least historically, I haven't seen a whole lot of long games of ZVZ lately, but we used to see Vipers added into the mix as well. So Lingbane into Roach Ravager into Hydra Lurker Viper. That is usually the ultimate unit composition, because once you get there, you basically can't die to anything. And obviously, we did have changes to the Brute Lord. We did have changes to the Ultralisk as well. I've been wondering about the Brute Lord specifically, though, because I can imagine that there are some Brute Lord options in this particular matchup, but I guess we'll find out. I like how this game, by the way, started off with a Proxy Hatchery into a Spine Crawler. And now 14 minutes later, it's spiraled into all of this. Okay, apparently soO wants to go for a move over here. Okay, you know what? Those Biles are forcing those Lurkers from Dark to unsiege. They're gonna be moving back. Little surprised here why the, okay. The roaches there idling for a little too long. Maybe they were waiting for that hatchery to be a little bit further done. So he's gonna start working on the rocks over here at the bottom of the ramp too. Dark should see this though, so he knows what he's playing against here and what he's roughly looking for. Spore crawlers in the front, exactly over here, just to be pushing back those overseers. Couple more roaches here, being obnoxious too, but soO is handling that one like a champ. So you always gotta wonder, right? Like, what is the win condition for somebody in a game of StarCraft 2? What exactly is the win condition for both of these players? I feel like Dark has had several opportunities in this game to try and, well, at least test the waters and see if he can potentially gain a huge advantage. soO has not really shown us what exactly he's planning on. He seems to be happy to just survive in the early game, and that could just be because he got that advantage earlier on, and he's like, you know what? I don't really need to be doing anything fancy. But now that advantage that he got himself in the early game, yeah, it's really no longer relevant. Okay, very nice corrosive balls, very nice snipes there as well. soO is microing these armies incredibly well. Ooh, okay, well, apparently Dark decides to move forward. Keep in mind, lurkers deal a tremendous amount of damage, specifically to roaches, but for now, Dark takes the engagement and he manages to push that all back. Pushing into a sieged up position like that, though, is so difficult, right? How in the world are you ever going to break the lurker lines? Alright, well, soO is ready to do a little bit of that harassment that he saw from his opponent himself as well. Technically speaking, this is something that Dark can see, but no notification on the minimap, and he'd have to look at the ground specifically. Most of the time, those tunneling claws are not very obvious. A lot of spine crawlers added into the mix as well here for Dark, as he is just turtling up. We don't normally see Zerg players turtle, but, huh. Apparently we are. Upgrades-wise, +3 is finishing here momentarily. The only difference, I guess, is Zergling speed. That's something that soO got as his very first upgrade, but no longer really the case. Roaches over here up north, they get spotted. You don't want to really sacrifice them, right? Even though the era is over. Roaches can still be quite handy. Sometimes you see players going back to roaches later on as well. When eventually the armies and the economies become too small. Sometimes going back to roaches is actually a very stellar choice, but so far not quite the case. 4 Vipers up in the air here for Dark. 3 for soO. So this is a really lovely little move right here from Dark, though. He gets them to the high ground. That base is super dead. Nice corrosive balls as well. Killing the overseers is huge, because obviously the lurkers are burrowed on the ground, and you need vision to actually see them. Nicely done right here, once again, by our Zerg player in red. soO's bank, though, is enormous. Look at the amount of money that he's got right here. Abductions and blinding clouds also incredibly valuable, as you can see him right now. Yeah, soO's shutting down temporarily, at least, the opponent's army. Lurkers were, of course, nerfed a little bit with the new multiplayer balance patch, but... Actually, no, they weren't. That was the previous one. Hold up, what exactly was the change again back then? Ah, right, I found it. So I've been talking about lurkers really quite needing a nerf once again over the last couple months that I started believing it myself. Obviously, their burrow time was increased a little bit. They used to be able to burrow a little bit faster. Honestly, we've seen so few Zerg versus Zergs over the last year, right? I've only really casted a handful as well. It's not so much that they're not being played. Like, usually in online cups and whatnot, there are Zerg versus Zergs being played, but most of the time, the games, they tend to end very early on. That's just the nature of things. A best of 3 of Zerg versus Zerg usually lasts like 15 minutes. It's very quick and usually not particularly interesting. This game right now, though, definitely has caught my interest. Because after a very aggressive early game, both players now can essentially make whatever they like. Now, it doesn't seem like, to me, that we're going to be seeing any drastic changes like we used to see back in the day. Like, there's no indicator here that either of these two players really want to transition towards anything other than Hydra Lurker. With Vipers for support, of course. Okay. Dark's thinking about moving forward, but pushing through this choke point is going to be nearly impossible. Once again, a hit squad of roaches here on the right side of the map. Those are pretty much the last ones. A lot of Vipers up in the air right now, actually, for Dark. So you can obviously abduct the opponent's Vipers, too. Vipers did get a little bit of a nerf. Oh my god, there we go. Both players basically trading position. Good blinding cloud right there, though, from Dark. forcing the opponent's units to wander forward. And these fights are not good right here for soO whatsoever, man. soO actually just ended up losing a lot more. So army size-wise, over the last 10 minutes, things have been relatively even. But you can see that nice little dip in over there at the end. That's the battle going in favor of Dark, who's just now adding on 25 additional lurkers. The man is going up to what? How many? The man's now got 36 lurkers. 2 Hydras, 2 Roaches, 36 lurkers, and a bunch of Vipers. Oh my god, okay. This came very unexpected. Is there enough right now for soO actually to stay alive? soO is just reinforcing this, right? Mostly Hydras. He hasn't really had a lot of time to, well, get his own lurkers going once again. Dark really wants to go a little bit deeper. That Spinecrawler from earlier, I believe, joining in here as well. Maybe it's a different spine, I'm not exactly sure, but it does look like the Spinecrawler from earlier. It's almost like they are identical. Just sort of seems that way. Anyways, okay, now we're gonna start fishing. Yeah. He's harpooning, well, it was, I think that was supposed to be a lurker, but he's harpooning whatever he can. So, since the Viper got nerfed a little bit, right? Since abduction is not as strong as it once was, I know that for a little bit, players were experimenting with Brute Lords. It seems to me, though, that this is the more logical approach. Rather than going into an entirely different unit, yeah, rather than going for like 4, maybe 5 Vipers, both players have essentially just doubled the amount of Vipers they usually go for. So apparently that solves the abduction problem. We have very heavy lurker counts, though. Yeah, 22 lurkers versus 22 lurkers. soO had to smash his piggy bank, but Dark also did the same thing in the meantime on the other side of the map. He has a lot of gas in the bank, but not nearly as much money here in general. Dark is also not as close to maxing out as soO is. Okay. Hatchery taken here on the left side of the map as well for soO. Wouldn't have minded seeing him mine that from the back. That would be kind of fun, but I think I've already brought that up in yesterday's video. I do think it's pretty fun to mine these from the wrong side, because he doesn't really need the gas here. That's still nice, of course, to get the gases. He's trying to re-secure the middle of the map. Income-wise, yeah, Dark has taken a nice advantage in that department. Obviously, he made a ton of static defense in order to actually secure all of this. A lurker's pretending to be static defense at this point, too. That was actually such a sick move, though. The fact that soO managed to hold on there is really awesome. Like, Dark basically was like, okay, I'm gonna whip out 35 lurkers, or whatever it was. And you'll have to deal with it, right? You'll have to figure out how you're gonna try and defend. Spore crawlers right now from the main base and from the bases in the back, moving further forward. This is mostly to prevent those overseers from sieging up too close by. Careful. Nice movement here once again by soO. On top of everything, you can see both players. A lot of actions per minute here are being used. Couple of spores coming up as well. I don't really like the lack of creep here. The lack of creep really makes all of this a bit trickier here for soO. I would love to see a couple of tumors going around. Obviously, creep in StarCraft 2 is neutral, so both players do benefit from it, but only the player with the creep tumors does get the vision, so Dark at this point, yeah, just getting a lot more vision on his side of the map, and now he finds the base over here. There's a couple harpoons, once again, absolutely picking off those lurkers one at a time relatively easily. Even though roach run-bys are no longer a thing, we can still do lurker run-bys. Kind of achieves the same thing, I suppose. Okay. And that's one base getting picked off right here on the left side of the map. The other base right now on the right side of the map also in a little bit of trouble. Units are sent on over in this direction, but again, this is asking a lot of the multitasking here for soO. Parasitic bombs right now on Vipers. We're gonna need to see the splits. Yeah, that ain't it, Chief. that was... Yeah, no, that wasn't great. He just took a ton of damage on those units. Now, he does have a bunch of queens available, but only 3 here. One more parasitic bomb on these Vipers is actually enough to finish them off, so... Going for a round of extra queens here for transfusions, but also for creep tumors, I think would have been incredibly helpful. Dark doing Dark-related things, just being obnoxious. Okay, parasitic bombs over here as well. Careful, careful, careful! Oh my god, okay. Well, at least there was also some counter damage dealt to Dark's Vipers. Only one remains right here from that big pack that we saw from soO earlier. That's the downside, of course, right? When you start pumping up more and more of those Vipers. So rather than going for the conventional 5 that we used to see or so back in the day, we now go for apparently up to 10. But if you go for that many, then it's indirectly also creating more and more value for the Parasitic Bomb ability. Which, by the way, deals 120 damage, area of effect. And to put that in comparison, things like Psionic Storm deal 80 damage. Now, I think we all know, oh my god, there's a beautiful Blinding Cloud once again here for Dark. But I think we all know that Psionic Storm is really good. Parasitic Bomb deals 50% more damage. Like, it's honestly incredibly powerful. The Vipers are quite tanky, but yeah. A second Parasitic Bomb is enough to finish it all off, is what I'm getting at. Anyways. Dark's been doing a very good job, though, clawing his way back into this game. Clearly more comfortable here in the late game. Free Abduction? No? I feel like you could have picked that one off, but no? Okay. Well, apparently this is the moment. Ooh, where soO was thinking on pouncing on this army, but yeah, instead he ends up losing a bunch of army once more. Parasitic Bombs. You need to pick off those units so rapidly, right? But it's much easier said than done. Alternatively, you could kill your own, I guess, but since there's so much micro that is forced to happen all at once, and since everything deals so much damage, it's very easy to accidentally make a mistake. So right now, trying to take the base over here. Dark has taken the golden minerals right here that were previously occupied by the Terran player in blue. Parasitic Bomb? Well, I guess we do see a Parasitic Bomb here, but good control that time around by soO. He's forced to split everything off. Does fly one of them maybe a little too far forward. Abductions once again. Okay, grabbing a couple of the lurkers once more. Dark has got so much money, though, to just rebuild all of this. Yeah, it's very clear so far in this game that soO is very good at the game. But he doesn't play very inspiring, right? Like, none of this really strikes me as like, ooh, this is something I want to be doing in my own games as well. In the meantime, Dark seems to, well, he seems to do Dark-related things, right? Where he's very comfortable, he's got that killer move every single time he seems to do anything. Yeah, just a lot more confidence coming out of the player here in red. And that's something we've been seeing over the last year once again from Dark. I know he was struggling at some point quite a bit, but he seems to have once again found his comfort zone. Okay. A little hit squad right here from the player in red, trying to be obnoxious, but detection now is gone, so he has to back off. He's still slow pushing here on the left side of the map. Terran players like to do this with Liberators and Siege Tanks. Zergs apparently have to do something similar with Vipers and Lurkers. But in the end, I think that Dark is getting the upper hand in basically everything. Okay, Blinding Clouds do go down. This is quite nice right here for soO. He's forced to push into a choke point. Okay, once more, another Blinding Cloud, really preventing a lot of those Lurkers from firing. But in the end, there's just so much, so much strength here still in that army left over right here from Dark. So he's gonna reinforce this with more and more Hydras. There's a Blinding Cloud. There's another, or Abductions, I guess. Blinding Clouds, Abductions, same thing. And despite the fact that soO got a very solid advantage in the earlier stages of this game, it's Dark who really just seemed to be in control from start to finish.